recent starting audience. So let me start with introducing myself and the series. So this is a part of the series called Highway to 100 webinar series. And as a part of this, we have been doing a series of webinars on various technical topics of interest to in-program startups as part of MFS. My name is Bob Breynaert at Microsoft for Startups. And the topic today is what's next with Azure OpenAI Service. As you know, Azure OpenAI Service is one of the services on which you can get credits as part of Microsoft for Startups. So if you have not applied for Microsoft for Startups program, you can go to startups.microsoft.com and apply for it. So as part of this topic, the attendees will leave the session with a firm understanding of how we can use the OpenAI service to improve and enhance the commercial service, applicable use cases, and examples of engagement with other ISVs. And we'll talk about the different models that are there as part of this service as well, and how to incorporate them into your products. So a little bit about Bob Breynaert, who is the speaker today. Bob Breynaert is the principal product manager and commercialization leader for Microsoft's development of the Azure OpenAI service. Prior to this role, Bob has spent 4 years at Equinix Incorporated as Vice President of Sales and Alliances. His organization focused on engineering, platform integration, global close selling with top hyperscale cloud service providers. And prior to his stint in Equinix, Bob spent 16 years at Microsoft in a variety of roles, including Azure Stack Commercialization Leader, General Manager of OEM Sales. Bob's specialization is in taking emerging businesses and bringing them up to scale. Right? That is what he's also focusing on at OpenAI. So this work goes back to the early days of Microsoft, where he was part of the part of the core team that brought to market the first generation of cloud services, followed by Microsoft's virtualization platform, IoT Silicon, and Azure Cloud Integration. So without further ado, over to you, Bob, so that we can talk about the Azure OpenAI service, which, as we know, is very interesting, and there's been a lot of interest in this service. So thank you for doing this for us. So over to you, to talk about the presentation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, everybody, and I appreciate your time. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Bob, we can see your screen.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Well, I appreciate all spending time today. I know it's a busy time of year. So I'm going to talk to you today about the Azure OpenAI service. I'm going to start off by chatting about OpenAI, OpenAI models, endpoints. I'm going to talk about Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI, how we work with them to co-develop products. I'm going to chat about the differentiation between the Azure OpenAI service and what you can do today on OpenAI. And then I'm going to get into details on the Azure OpenAI service, the timeline, the models and features that are available now and what's coming. And then I'll chat about engagement options. So we'll finish up here in probably about 40 minutes, and then we'll get into questions and answers. So thanks very much, and here we go. Okay, so I'm going to be talking roadmap information here. This is confidential between our companies, so please no screenshots or tweeting or any kind of public disclosure of anything that we discuss here today. Okay, so let me talk to you about just general business strategy in AI. So there's really three things that we do in new areas of technology. So I'm part of the engineering organization that builds our cognitive services and machine learning services in Azure. We also buy. We bought Nuance Communications. We closed that on recently. We're integrating right now, and we're sort of like vetting together how our different products will work together, et cetera, incorporating our technologies into Nuance and vice versa. So that's an acquisition. With OpenAI, we decided to invest in the company. They're a startup. They're very scrappy. They're working, doing some extremely innovative work. So we decided to invest. We announced a $1 billion cash investment a couple of years ago. We've built the sort of Azure infrastructure-based supercomputer that all the OpenAI models sit on, and we have sort of an exclusive licensing relationship with OpenAI. I mean, essentially, they are one of you. They're a startup. They announced, in addition to our investment, I think it was a Series A a couple of months ago, probably 80% of their people are in R&D. So they're essentially a research lab. We do a lot of work collaboratively together in safety and policy around responsible AI. And they also have a commercial service. We made a decision, probably about a year ago, to really bring forward a commercialized service. So startups and enterprise customers in government can go in, set up a sandbox, start testing out different use cases, and also OpenAI is pretty good at taking customers to production. So there's a lot of startups, digital natives that are up and running on OpenAI for production right now. So really the way we work together is you'll see, in OpenAI's blog posts, and you can, get access to all the new models that they produce. So it seems like every week they're announcing something new. What we do with them is our engineering teams, work very closely together, throughout the development process of something new. Like today, our teams are working together on GPT-4. But essentially that work is mainly done by OpenAI. They release it to customers. Maybe saw an announcement recently about the GPT so-called 3.5, which are the instruction following 002 models a couple of months ago, embeddings. So they're announcing DALL-E 2 was announced recently. Part of my role is that we engage jointly with customers. So they have a commercialization team, peer to the team that I'm on. We work jointly with customers, look at these new models, get type of feedback. And if there's a lot of strong feedback that we'd like to bring this onto Azure, or we'd like you to bring this onto Azure, we'll accelerate movement of different models and endpoints onto the Azure service. In general, why do customers use OpenAI versus using Azure OpenAI Service? It's generally the Azure features that are needed. So the models are the same, the user experience is very similar. A lot of customers, whether the startups, large enterprise, could be government, have security and reliability issues, or so I should say, yes, mainly security issues, GDPR compliance, HIPAA compliance, financial services certifications. So if your service that you're offering to your customers has any kind of regulatory compliance, or you want to use Azure Active Directory, you want to use VNets, for networking, Azure OpenAI Service is the place for you. If you're very comfortable using sort of OpenAI's multi-tenant environment, we highly suggest that you build on OpenAI. You can always send me and the team here a piece of mail, and we can do some introductions to some of their research engineers. We're very agnostic, but we want customers, from startups to Fortune 500 companies that need Azure features to work on the Azure OpenAI service. A lot of customers that start off on OpenAI, working on their API, and then come to us and just simply do a repro of the work that they've already done on OpenAI. So today, the service is very focused on GPT-3, as well as CodeX models for natural language to code. If you take a look at the lower part of the slide, OpenAI announced Image GPT-3, Clip sort of utilized both of those technologies to announce DALL-E. The second iteration, DALL-E 2, was announced 2 weeks ago. We're working on that right now. We're looking at that, about bringing that onto the OpenAI service. It's very early. So OpenAI is taking it, gathering feedback with the users of it. We'll jointly work on that. Once it reaches a point of relative maturity, we'll bring it onto the Azure OpenAI service, because customers want it in production. They want it mission critical. They expect a service level agreement around it. This is kind of how we work. Reach a point of maturity of the model, bring it onto the OpenAI service. Pretty cool stuff. Other things like Jukebox, that may or may not come onto the service. Certain other areas, and I use robotics as an example, OpenAI decides not to invest any longer in that, and they discontinue it. So what we got here is we got a continuous innovation flywheel. OpenAI develops something, we jointly work with customers, we bring it up onto the service. We want you to do the same thing. We highly encourage you to work on both OpenAI, test the latest models, latest endpoints, give us the feedback on what you need to bring onto the Azure service, for your customer segments or your service in general that requires Azure security and sort of enterprise features. That's the way we want to work. We want you innovating, and we want you going to production. You choose which service is best for you. Let's talk about OpenAI itself. So the Azure OpenAI Service I mentioned is built right now and accommodates the GPT-3 models as well as the CodeX models. To be more specific, GPT-3, for those of you who don't know, it's an extremely advanced, 170 billion parameter autoregressive language model. And basically it predicts the next word. The earlier stuff, would predict the next word based on the prior word or words. The newest instruction following models will look at the input in its entirety and base the next word completion on the information contained in the entire prompt. So you have an example, negate the following sentence, it'll read what negate is, and it'll give you an answer that is basically a completion to the question you've asked. Pretty easy. Text in, text out interface. I'll show you a demo of the Azure service. You can work in something called the playground environment, which is a simple text in, text out for single shot. And then you can work, in basically an SDK to do the work directly, in code. You can do then, few shot learning. You can actually do fine tuning there. So it's a really interesting way to take it from early prototyping and experimentation all the way through to production. So let's talk a bit more about the GPT-3 model. So we do have the Ada, Babbage, Curie, and DaVinci models. We have both the base series, the first iteration that was released, and we also have the Instruct 001 Text DaVinci, Ada, Babbage, and Curie -001 model series. OpenAI has released the 002 series, which is so-called GPT 3.5. We're taking feedback on customers using that, and we'll be bringing that onto the Azure service later on this calendar year. So today we have, the 4 models. You can also fine tune Ada, Curie, and DaVinci. So with the instruction following 001 models and fine tuning and the core Azure features we have, we feel like customers today can bring their use cases into production, and we're doing that right now. We have our Build Conference, which is our developer conference. Would encourage you to all go online and register. You'll be seeing a lot of information about the Azure OpenAI service and our relationship with OpenAI, and our CEO, Satya Nadella's keynote, our CTO keynote, and then Eric Boyd, my corporate vice president, will be talking quite a bit about OpenAI. So you'll be seeing more about use cases, about customer adoption, things of that nature. So that's coming up, I think May 25th. So I encourage you to go online, Build 2022, and register. It is online. It is not a face-to-face conference. Okay, so let's get into it more. Okay, so with GPT-3, I mentioned earlier this playground environment, this general purpose sort of text in, text out interface. So it's a very simplified UX. I'll show you the Azure Studio UI here in about 20 minutes. And then also there's built-in machine learning scientists, where you can really go in and fine tune the models. So it's a perfect combination of going in and prototyping with the playground environment, and I'll show you that, and then also getting in and doing model fine tuning. Bringing us back to this diagram here, what we see a lot of customers doing is they do a lot of prototyping on DaVinci, particularly for abstractive summarization, content generation, copywriting, things like even with sentiment, intent, classification. And then once they enter into the fine tuning, they'll bring the model down to Curie or Babbage. You get lower inferencing time. We're releasing pricing on this and pay-as-you-go billing in the August timeframe, and it's a lot less expensive. Curie, Babbage, Ada decrease in cost as you work down the stack. So capabilities are also, when you add fine tuning, you'll be able to get similar results with a fine-tuned Curie as you would get with a few shot learning on DaVinci. This is really important for things like avatars. I don't know if any of you are building avatars, but what we see people is using Babbage or Curie to get that inferencing time down, to be able to have the avatar have a very conversational point of view. They're usually starting off with sentiment, so the avatar will be able to translate sentiment into facial expressions and intonation of voice, etc. So we're seeing that's kind of how people are doing, starting off on DaVinci and then backing down to other lower inferencing time, lower cost models for production. It's kind of how we work together. We, meaning my team, we can provide you assistance with prompt engineering, with fine tuning. We've got a team set up to do that, so you're not alone in this. Same thing with OpenAI. They have a group of research engineers that do the same thing I just described. So either way you go, we're here to support you. Let's go back to the deck here. Okay, so I talked about earlier about ideating ideas quickly. Well, that's a tongue twister, especially in the morning here. The next stop would be to go into few-shot learning and then fine-tuning in OpenAI. So I mentioned earlier, we've got team members here in the engineering org that can help you with each of those activities. CodeX, a lot of action with CodeX. We're really interested, super interested in working with the startup community around CodeX models. We do have the Cushman CodeX model that's up on the service right now. It's code Cushman 001. DaVinci CodeX will be coming later on this calendar year. So most of you are aware that the GPT-3 models are sort of trained on a very large corpus from the public internet, publications, internet, etc. With the GPT-3 models, there's no language support for languages other than English, but you do get really good results for Dutch, German, French, main languages. Even Mandarin, we got pretty good results with that, but you're not going to get any kind of service level agreement on that. CodeX is similar. I mean, it is trained on billions of lines of code from a lot of the GitHub public repos. And therefore, because GitHub contains a variety of programming languages, you're going to see support for Python, C#, Perl, PHP, Ruby, Rust. I mean, just about every programming language there. And you can do multiple tasks with it. You can put comments in from code. You can use the autocomplete function to bring the next line of the code in. And I've got a part of the demo will do that. A lot of customers we're working with that have old code, like COBOL, for instance, COBOL or Python. We're doing a lot of refactoring projects right now. Use cases, NL to code and NL to SQL are really the two top ones we have right now, particularly customers in, let's say, aerospace that have huge corpus of flight telemetry data are using to sort of democratize access to those data to non-developers to be able to do SQL queries into very large databases. Code documentation, code to natural language, training data generation for coding is also something we see quite a bit, with CodeX. It's based on basically our GitHub Copilot. So for those of you who have not really tried out, the CodeX models, you can do that either by getting on the OpenAI.com API, registering on their site, and also registering for access to GitHub Copilot. It's really cool. It could really help you shorten your development cycles, more efficient coding. Okay, switch gears. Let's talk about what we're doing in Azure. So from here on in, we're going to be talking about the work that we're doing to incorporate the OpenAI models and build Azure around them. So just to clarify, anything you do on OpenAI will be on their commercial service. Yes, it sits on Azure infrastructure, but it is not an Azure service. Like what we have today in Azure OpenAI Service is a full Azure cognitive service. If those of you who aren't very familiar with our stack, this is just a simple layer cake stack. Our machine learning platform is foundational at the bottom. We do have API-based customizable AI models around vision, speech, language, decision, and now the Azure OpenAI Service. So these are APIs that you can call, bring them into the services that you're providing. For a lot of enterprise customers that really want more of a scenario-based service with a little more built around it. We are taking the APIs in the middle here and consuming them into some services, like Forms Recognizer, where you can do, OCR for specific, document formats, etc. Bot service, to build bots, metrics advisor, video analyzer, etc. We don't have a scenario-based service for OpenAI. And, one of the things we want to do with startups and enterprises is get feedback so we can determine whether or not we should build one. And if we do, what will go into it? Because like OpenAI is raw, right? It's API access. You have to do a lot of, development work on top of that to, certainly for an enterprise commercial service, but even yourselves. So we're super interested in feedback on all those areas from you. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, so Azure OpenAI Service, we talked a lot earlier about unlocking business value with new experiences and prototyping concepts in minutes. I mean, really what that's all about is using OpenAI to quickly ideate on certain things. Can I use OpenAI, to go in and do keyword extraction, of documents? Can I use OpenAI to copyright? Can I use OpenAI to summarize, 1,000 Google reviews? Extract keywords and then build that very quickly into a marketing campaign. What are the positive aspects of this product? Let's build some marketing statements around that. Let's summarize, let's extract keywords, let's look at sentiment, and then build that into our marketing message. Or let's find out the problems. Let's find out the negative sentiment. Let's extract those keywords that correlate to keywords that you may have in your product. And then let's build, let's do some classification of that, and then let's build that into our customer feedback review cycles. A lot of really cool things that you can do quickly in that playground environment. Text in, text out. You can modulate temperature for randomness. You can specify output size, for the completions. There's a lot of really interesting work you can do in zero shot right there or even few shot right in there in the playground environment. But really what we're doing in Azure Service are the bottom two things. Let's talk about that in a little more detail. So today, here's another layer cake representation. Today in OpenAI, you will have, of course, GPT-3 and CodeX models, embeddings, GPT 3.5, more models coming. Same thing in our service. You can do inference and fine tuning in both. What we're doing is really focusing on things like building content filtering, add and remove lists directly into the service. So we're building in these safety systems and controls to help you intercept any kind of issues, any kind of like nefarious content, any kind of completions that may cause issues with your customer's view of your products. We're building that right into the product. Azure security and reliability built in also. And then, for those of you who are Azure customers, your Azure discount, your billing, your commitment, going, against retiring the Azure commitment you have, it's all, Azure. It's pure Azure. So responsible AI, a little bit more on that, because I know it's really, really important for us to talk through that a bit. So we are building in, starting off here within the next couple of months with content filters. We are also building in abuse detection, and we're providing patterns and practices for implementing Azure Responsible AI into your service. This is coming in stages like everything else we're doing. The first phase will be here in a few months. We'll be building in content filtering. So this is something that is very differentiated relative to what you will get on OpenAI. It's OpenAI has great controls. Ours will be Azure level controls. Here, I'm going to do a demo. What I'm going to do here is just start the demo, and then I'm going to ask if you can hear the sound, because sometimes it doesn't pick up, and then I'll restart it. So let's go to the demo, and then I'm going to start it for about 1.5 seconds. If you could let me know whether you can hear it.
Hi, everyone.
Did you hear the demo?
Yeah, Bob, we can hear you.
Today, I want to quickly show you how we are bringing OpenAI's powerful models into the Azure ecosystem to help developers both iterate faster and satisfy their enterprise requirements. Here you can see the Azure OpenAI Studio, which we built to help all skill levels prototype their ideas and bring their creativity to life. With our Studio UI and the flexible models from OpenAI, you can iterate on different use cases with the same models in UI. For example, here I'm going to ask the model to extract information from an email by including both the email and my question written in natural English.
So I mentioned, Julie, we have the playground environment. If you register for access to OpenAI on openai.com, you will receive the OpenAI version of the playground environment. The Azure environment looks almost identical. The only real difference is that our deployments, the list of models is on the top, in the center here, and on the OpenAI playground environment, you will see it in the right nav. So there's a number of things you could do here. You can specify temperature, which is sort of the randomness of the completions. Sometimes if you have a sort of a generative use case, at a very low temperature, it'll start going off and developing sort of repetitive random sentences. So you need to modulate the temperature based on, sort of the level of specificity of the outputs. Something like this, temperature 1, you're going to get a very short response. The lower the temperature, you're going to get something a little more flowery, but it may stray off and start to hallucinate a little bit. Response length basically gives you, the length of the response. Do you want something short? Do you want something long? I'm not going to go in and talk about the rest, but you'll be able to go into the OpenAI playground environment and see for yourself. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the other use cases here that we're going to be demoing, and then we'll carry through to completion to show fine tuning and also a little bit about the core Azure features we're building in.
Or I'm going to ask the same model to convert a paragraph description of fruits on an imaginary planet into a structured tabular format. In my third example, we'll use the same model again to classify news articles. Finally, we'll use a different model, our CodeX models, to generate documentation on the provided Python function, but still within the same UI.
So here you can see that we've done some natural language type work directly in the playground environment, and then we've switched to Code Cushman, one of the CodeX models, and can do some natural language to code type use cases, code to NL, NL to code, NL to SQL. So it's a very versatile, usable, thing where you can do your early prototyping, and then, as we'll see in the next portion here, you can get right into fine tuning.
Once developers progress further in their journey, they can easily transition from this prototyping to fine tuning and customizing their models all within the UI. Finally, when developers are ready to move towards a production application, they can leverage some of the more unique aspects of the Azure service compared to OpenAI's. We provide key enterprise promises with network security, privacy, and responsible AI tooling. For example, we enable authentication through Azure Active Directory so customers can securely access their fine-tuned models.
So for those of you who are already working on Azure, you can leverage the same security policy, the same responsible AI controls you're using in other Azure Cognitive Services and machine learning, because this is part of the Azure Cognitive Services family. Let's move on.
Hi, everyone.
So use cases. I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this because this is very relevant. So I've been working on this since we launched at our Ignite conference on November 3rd last year. This was announced by Satya Nadella, our CEO. And so we went into this really thinking, okay, summarization and writing assistance are really going to be, the top use cases, and they are. Like basically about, let's say, 20% of the people working are working on summarization, writing assistance. It's about the same, but over half the people that we're working with on the language side right now are using this to do things like classification, intent, sentiment, search, which will only get better once we add embeddings onto the service later on this quarter. I call this reasoning over structured and unstructured data. So I'll give you 4 examples. One is we're working with an automotive manufacturing company. We're working with an aerospace company. We're working with an ISV right now, a startup, basically that wants to take a look at their customer feedback. What are customers saying? What is the sentiment? Can I classify the feedback into certain categories and then correlate that back to product features or individual SKUs or different lines of products that we have? Also, what are our employees saying? What are they concerned about? Are they concerned about COVID in the workplace? Are they concerned about benefits? Does the coffee suck? There's lots of things that we can that they're doing with on the language side to really reason that type of thing. Another in healthcare, we're working with a company right now that does a lot of work with Medicare. Medicare is the government-run medical program that we have here in the U.S. And so what they're using it for is they have contracts with the government, with the Veterans Administration, with the actual Medicare Health and Human Services Department, and they get hit with a lot of claims, of course, as you might imagine. Any patient out there that is using Medicare for benefits is going to make a claim for like reimbursement or for a healthcare issue to be covered by insurance. So what this company is doing that we're working with is they're taking doctor notes, and they could be transcriptions of conversations. They could be notes that are put in the medical records. They could be paper notes that are, in PDF format or TIFF or whatever. So what this company is doing is they're using OCR, for instance, for those document formats, and then taking the unstructured data that is in the other document formats, and basically using OpenAI to extract keywords and then to do comparisons with what is the allowed prescribed treatment level for any kind of particular health concern, and either flagging things that should not be reimbursed or approving things for reimbursement. So that's one of the things they're using today. Customer support emails is another big thing. We're seeing a lot of people using that, let's say for a claim, and they can use it for fraud detection. Did that customer submit a similar claim where they've changed a few words? Extract out the issues from the claim. Who is the person? Let's say it's a car accident, an automobile accident. Who is the person? Are they insured? What's their policy number? Were there injuries? And then ask it rather abstract questions like, is there legal risk associated with that? Do you think that this person will sue our insurance company? Very good issues on, very good on that. Also, social media trends, very similar to the customer employee feedback. And what we see there is customers often, prior to doing the work, using summarization. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got a automotive retailer that is taking the summarization, endpoint and basically doing summaries of hundreds of Google reviews for new automobiles that are released. Taking that, then doing search, then doing sentiment classification, and then pushing that into their writing assistance automation. So instead of using contract staff for copywriting and analyzing, they're running that directly in and in, over a single API, summarizing, getting reasoning over the data, and then writing marketing taglines and pushing that directly up onto their website. So they can gain a big competitive advantage over their competitors that are doing it in the more traditional way of having people do manual reviews of information and then hiring copywriters, contract staff to actually write the marketing. And they're cutting huge cycles off of their time, and they can get first mover advantage for new automobile models that are put out there. CodeX, we need to do more work on CodeX. I'd say about 80% of what we're doing right now is using the large language models. We'd like to do more with CodeX. What we have right now is very heavy on natural language SQL. We are working with a few startups and a couple of larger digital natives on coding projects using the natural language to code capabilities of CodeX. But this is an area we'd be really interested to work with you on. Let's talk about engagement options. I want to spend just the last couple of minutes here before we get into Q&A about how we can work together. So the program that I run, it's called the Microsoft OpenAI Customer and Partner Community. And we're very interested in working with companies that are part of the Microsoft for Startups program. If you do join that program, you actually do get OpenAI benefits. There's some things you can read about if you do a Google search on OpenAI benefits, Microsoft for Startups program. I'm sure my colleagues here can provide you information, but you do get free tokens. You do get a few hours of free consulting time to talk about your use case. And these people are like, for those of you that are in the program that have access to this, like, use the benefit. These people are like super, super sharp. And then you'll get a discount on more tokens for usage, and they'll give you a discount on, they have sort of like what they call innovation licenses, where you can gain access for a fee of, I think it's $5,000 a month to their research engineers, and you get sort of like free hours to kick off that process. So if you want to start your work on OpenAI, please go in and register for access there. You're a member of our program. Please take a look at the benefits. If you're going to be joining the program, it's a great way for you to experience OpenAI and work with some of the really smartest people I've ever worked with. For those of you that really want to try out the OpenAI service preview, that really want to do this in Azure for whatever reason that is, security, reliability, your end customers' requirements, GDPR, et cetera, let me know. Come to us through the team. we have a two-step process that we want to take you through. One is there's some participation terms, because we are pre-general availability. We are in a private preview right now. There are certain things that we do not offer, like there's no service level agreements. We want to basically have the right to take a look at anything that has responsible AI concerns. So there are some participation terms that sit underneath your existing Azure agreement. And then we like to do a use case review. There are certain things that we're not doing now. There's certain things we're never going to do with OpenAI. We're never going to allow people to do sort of unconstrained creation of content for Twitter or fueling the metaverse. I always like to use that analogy, but there are certain things that are really difficult for us to accommodate right now because of the generative nature of the models and the potential for misuse. It could either be in the hands of people that aren't really experienced, or it could be nefarious characters that we're trying to stay away from anything that could cause undue harm of people. This is all about AI for good. Yeah, we're building in responsible AI controls to intercept, but the easiest way to intercept is to not allow it. So send me your use case. I have a link that we can send to you. If you're not ready to get started, I'm also going to be kicking off community calls later this quarter, to do things like this, to talk about responsible AI controls, to talk about core Azure components, AAD, security, things of that nature. So those are the two engagement options that we have right now. If you're interested, let us know, and I can give you information on OpenAI preview. If you're not, you don't want to start there, let us know, and I can do an introduction to the OpenAI research engineers who can get you going on their platform and enact some of those benefits from the startups program. So that's what I have today. We've got about 23 minutes. We've got plenty of time for questions and answers. So I'm going to stop sharing right now, and I'm going to turn it over for questions and answers. So Vinayak, if you could start taking us through.
Yeah, hi Bob. That was great. I think it answered at least some of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat, but I'll kind of go through some of the questions that are coming in. Meanwhile, if you have any more questions, I think you can post them in the chat, and Bob and me will answer them. So Ross McLaughlin asks, why do I use OpenAI instead of cognitive services? If I'm starting a project using cognitive services, should I use OpenAI instead?
Yeah, I mean, the experience you'd have, when you're on OpenAI service, because of the Studio UI you have, will be the exact same experience that you'd have on OpenAI. So for early prototyping, I'm really kind of agnostic on that. I mean, what we see, in terms of companies that are working on OpenAI right now, people are really trying to look at an early product market fit. Really trying to test out new, really highly novel scenarios, brand new scenarios. Most of the people working in OpenAI are startups and enterprises who really want access to the earliest alpha models. For instance, if you want to go try out Instruct 002 or DALL-E 2, like the day it comes out, we highly encourage you to work on OpenAI API. Most of the companies we're working with sort of graduate their validated scenarios to Azure for production. Like we have a lot of startups that are prototyping a new scenario in OpenAI, running in production on Azure. In terms of investment, I'm getting an echo in the background. Okay. In terms of investments, I mean, your investments are going to be, the models themselves, any kind of API platform innovation that you're going to do. For Azure, if you want to trust an enterprise solution, you need enterprise-grade offerings, even in your innovation work. You could start off on Azure or bring your work on OpenAI to Azure. But the common foundation is here. We have a common model library, an API platform parity. So we have all the capabilities that really matter, common across too. And then we have developer experience parity, both at the playground environment, the SDK. I mean, you can even access the OpenAI APIs through the OpenAI Python SDK, let's say. So You're really agnostic on what you plan to do. It really depends on what you need. Next question. So, Vinayak, do I still have you?
Yeah, can you hear me or?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think also to add to what you said, I think cognitive services also offer a range of things which are different from OpenAI, whether it's speech, whether it is text search and vision. So you can actually always combine them with OpenAI, right? So that is always an option.
I think we're having some Teams issues. Vinayak, I'm not picking up some of what you're saying here.
Okay. Okay, I'll try that again. Do we need to take any permission before we go to production? Is what Arvi is asking.
Yeah, on both OpenAI and Azure OpenAI Service, there is a production review. They're very similar, processes, but we really want to look at, what you're planning on doing production, particularly for use cases where the users are external to your company. So yes, both with Azure and also with OpenAI, there is a pre-production review that is done. Good question.
Cool. Yeah, and on this call, we because we are in the US EU time zone, we get a lot of countries in EU, in LATAM, as well as Africa, right? And I think this is a question that comes up in many places. Does OpenAI work be used with other languages, or is it just available currently in English?
Yeah, that's another great question. You all are hitting all the really good questions. So if you take a look at, like Microsoft Translator, I mean, it is certified in a huge number of languages. Some of the stuff we're doing around our language text analytics and language understanding, yeah, supports languages. There are service level agreements that we can apply to things like that. With OpenAI, there isn't language support outside of English. But what we find, particularly on common languages that are represented well on the public internet, OpenAI does remarkably well. We have customers that are using it right now natively in Dutch. We've gotten great results in Mandarin. Even double by character set languages does quite well. French, we have quite a few companies that are using it. But what I would recommend is that when you're doing your testing, benchmark, doing some, pre-processing with Microsoft, or it could be Amazon or Google translation service, and then doing it in English versus natively. And like we have one customer, a government customer in the Middle East that's actually doing work in Arabic right now and getting really good results, some grammatical issues and so forth. But to answer your question directly, no, there's no formal language support, but the degree to which a language is represented on the public internet, and specifically in the corpus of the public internet that OpenAI models were trained on, it does a really good job. But you're not going to, like I would really do some serious testing on it prior to go, as part of your innovation work and evaluation work. Good question.
Support at Textify.ai asked this question. Can you tell us more about the custom decision-making services on Azure? We are building an AI thinking tool that helps people with decision-making. Wondering if it's the right tool for our purpose. Yeah, I think
that one's a bit outside of my area and an area of the call. But we can certainly have a deep dive on that with my peer that handles decision. His name is Senyu, and we can get that moving. Yeah, it's frankly speaking not a area of my subject expertise, but it is a cognitive service. It is mature. It is out there. We certainly love to, test the capabilities of that relative to what you need it to do. So, maybe Vinayak, we could take an action item and start a mail thread, and I can introduce in my my peer on that one. That's actually Ben is his name, not Senyu. Senyu is supporting vision.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think, and again, like depending what you want to do, actually you can use that in conjunction with OpenAI, right? For example, you can use the cognitive services for actually making the decision, and maybe if you want to either vocalize or if you want to generate, then you can use the OpenAI. So it is not one versus the other, but you can use a combination. But again, it depends on what exactly are you trying to do. So if you know a little bit more about your use case, we will be able to hear you more. And as we go on this presentation, I will also post a couple of links to the talks we've had, in this series on cognitive services as well. So maybe those might be helpful for you as well. And again, like as Bob said, we'll leave our coordinates, so you can reach out to us with any other further question. On to the next question. Callum Bird from Trelent asks, "Hi Bob, thanks for this. Can you speak to what the pricing model looks like on Azure versus OpenAI? You discussed many of the Azure benefits around security and privacy, but I would love to learn more about single tenant hosting solutions, particularly for fine-tune variations and the pricing structure here."
Yeah, that's a great question, Callum. And in all the discussions I've had, most of the questions have been around pay-as-you-go pricing. But you asked about single tenant hosting. Yeah, we do have a dedicated instance model, very similar to spinning up a dedicated VM. We do have that. The pricing for that is hourly based, usage based, by the hour. So we do have that, really good for low latency, because you'll get some amazing, very, very low latency compared to what you will achieve on OpenAI. Like for DaVinci, one customer said they were having like a 1, maybe 2 second response time, inference time with the dedicated instance, using a dedicated provisions instance on Azure OpenAI, they were getting 200 to 350 milliseconds. So really good reduction in latency. The pricing, is going to be by hour of usage. We will also have a pay-as-you-go token-based model, basically the same type of model that you see on OpenAI right now. Pricing is going to be different than OpenAI because of the fact that we have, Azure services and so forth. Our COGS is different than the OpenAI COGS. So there's things that, will contribute on like, hey, we should charge more for this, but then on some of the COGS efficiencies, it brings the cost back down. Pricing will be released in the August timeframe. I don't know what the pricing is right now because it hasn't been finalized, but we'll release that around the August timeframe. And you can work on both, both the dedicated provisioned instance model or the pay-as-you-go token-based model. Different architecture, different inference time, different price.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, so Ankita is asking on the question related to languages, does it specifically include Hindi or Marathi, or is there an index of languages that is supported? If you can post a link to that, yeah.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned this earlier, I think it probably answered the question. We don't have a list of supported languages. It's going to be, I suggest, register for access on OpenAI and do your testing. Just as a layperson, I would imagine Hindi is probably, you would get better response because a higher percentage of the public internet is probably on Hindi, the corpus that it was trained on. Marathi, I don't know. You would need to go in and test, that type of thing. But you can certainly do layering of our translation service, doing some pre-processing and translation, bringing it into English, and then running the work and then translating back. So, that's the beautiful thing about this playground environment is you can prototype on it. You can, you can use natively in Hindi. You can, take that, translate it, pull the translated version into the playground environment. You can do some few shot learning on it, teaching it. Hindi, there's lots of different things you can do just completely out of the box without model fine tuning on the playground environment. So, I encourage you for the sake of time, all of you actually, to go in if you're not using OpenAI, to get in and register for access. I know there is a question that came in, and I can cover this now about how we can get you, hooked up with OpenAI, with the OpenAI research people. There's 2 ways. One, send us a piece of mail. Send us your email. I'll just, forward that on to my friend Adam Goldberg and colleagues at OpenAI. And they can give you some free tokens. They can set up and do a conference call with you to do kind of like a, a 1-hour call to talk about your use case, sort of give you like, yeah, we can do this, or maybe you want to do this, or maybe you want to wait a couple of weeks until we've released this endpoint. So they'll be able to give you some really good pointers, not only on what's available today, but also what's coming in the next weeks or months. So I would suggest that you just contact me and Vignac, put your name on it. I'll forward it on to my friends at OpenAI, to Adam, and they'll just take it off from there and run with it with you. You then give them your email addresses, name of the domain that you want hooked up in their directory service, who the group admin is going to be, and you're off and running. It takes a couple of days. It's pretty quick. I do a couple of these a day. The other is your benefits through the Azure Microsoft for Startups program. And there's a whole mechanism to basically hook you up with the same people I talked about earlier. If you're not in the program, you want to get started sooner, drop me a piece of mail. They love startups.
Cool. Yeah, so Shifte is asking, is facial recognition AI available to be used, let's say, for a beauty tech startup, or to use AI to recognize skin texture?
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, facial recognition is one of those areas where it can either be highly radioactive. I'm not talking about the person whose face we're detecting, but like it can be very cause major issues from a responsible AI standpoint. So all I can tell you is absolutely yes. We have vision services. It would be a use case by use case basis. The best thing I can do is to hook you up with my colleague Senyu, the gentleman I mentioned earlier. And Senyu is our commercialization product manager for vision, which includes facial recognition. So yeah, love to have a discussion on that. So again, get in contact with us, and I can do a hookup there.
Yeah, so I have shared, a couple of you asked for my email address. I've shared my email addresses, and I'll share Bob's too as well in a bit. I think Callum is asking a follow-up question. Which Azure region is OpenAI service available in right now? Are there plans to expand that regional availability in the future?
Callum, you must be like, someone must have given you the questions. Like you're just like on fire here. As I was going to mention that in my talk track, but I forgot. So yeah, it's available today in South Central region, US South Central, which is I think in San Antonio. Latency shouldn't be an issue. But right now we're asking all customers to work in the South Central region. So from a GDPR standpoint, that does pose a problem. We are bringing capacity online in West Europe, probably in the July-August timeframe. So that'll be available, but it's not going to be blown out into like the 60+ Azure regions we have. It'll be South Central US, eventually East US, West Europe. Probably not many more than that right now. So we do that with a lot of our newer cognitive services. I mean, this thing is very GPU hot, and so we really try to concentrate in certain areas, certain Azure regions. So good question. If we put you on today, it would be in South Central US.
Great. And I think the final question, unless we get a couple more in the time you answer. So Sari asks, from a fine-tuning perspective, can a model be augmented with a internal body of written work so that generated text can essentially sound similar?
Yeah,
so I think this is more about can you train the model to express a certain tone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what you can do exactly with the fine-tuning endpoint. The OpenAI is trained on like that, pre-training on the public internet. There's a huge, also a compendium of multiple volumes of books, thousands, I don't know how many, but yeah, I mean, you would fine tune and load up, fine tune the model based on your corpus. And absolutely, that would be something that we could help you with too. So the answer is yes.
Cool. And yeah, there's another question that has come in the meanwhile. Sriram Devarakonda asks, are there any publicly documented production use cases in healthcare that we can take a look at?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're in a private preview, and you'll be seeing some things come out at our Build conference at the end of May. That will be, in fact, there'll be a healthcare company that will announce that, use case that I talked about earlier, the Medicare type use case. Right now, we don't have any public use cases because we're not public yet. We're in a private preview, but more on that will be coming. Healthcare is one of the industry verticals where we have a lot of activity on that. There's quite a bit in the regulatory environment, such as summarization of clinical trials data, for new drugs, basically automating the completion of a report to like the Food and Drug Administration or a similar regulatory body. So coming up with a document format, extractive summarization of clinical trial patient interaction, keyword extraction, and then pulling information together from that into a document format for regulatory submittal. So there's a whole lot of stuff we're doing around that area. News and trends analysis is another big one in healthcare. We're working with one healthcare provider based in the US here. Basically, what's in the news? Is there anything about us in the news? Is there anything about this new area? Competitive analysis. There's quite a bit of work going on in risk analysis. What is our risk envelope versus what is the risk envelope of our peer companies? And then therefore, should we make any adjustments to the work that we're doing? So there's a lot that we can talk about in healthcare, but nothing that's been publicly announced. Yeah, I mean, if you're in healthcare, we could have a really good conversation.
Cool. And feel free to, Bob and me have both shared our email addresses, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any other additional questions. Almost at time, and I think we covered a lot of ground and we answered all of the questions. So thank you, Bob, for taking the time out and doing. And we'll be repeating this session in a few hours, on an APAC friendly time zone as well. So if you have any, if your team is actually based in APAC, as some of the startups as we have seen, and they want to, and your colleagues want to join, do let them know as well. So we'll hear back from you soon. And thank you all for attending. Thanks, Bob.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. I wish you the best day and evening. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye.